before we come to the session of Q&A. All right, I'm going to read from the chapter of my book, Why It's Never Obvious. It began with a simple plot. Leslie suspected that our neighbor was sabotaging us by pouring dog urine in the concealed compartment which housed the public utilities meter. He made our older son, Jeremy, stand outside the front door to keep an eye on our neighbor. When I get to know about it, I was more upset with him for asking Jeremy to stand watch for long period when it was his primary school leaving examination year. I would rather Jeremy spend more time doing assessment papers. So I suggested to Leslie to install a cheap camera instead outside the main door, thinking that it would have ended the matter if there was no trace of evidence to support his suspicion. Little did I expect this harmless act of installing a camera to tailspin into an obsession for Leslie, which frustrated me, but it was frightening yet exhilarating for Jeremy and my younger son, Ryan, 8 years old. Soon the cheap camera was replaced with rented high-tech cameras at the front door, the living room, the balcony, and the window of the study room, all vulnerable spots where our neighbor could easily peek into our apartment using sophisticated pinhole cameras. Leslie would sit for hours glued to a screen, waiting to pounce upon the suspect. He forbade us to turn on the lights in the evenings so that he could have a better look at the culprit's camera. This went on for a month, and I was beginning to get annoyed and worried at the same time. Again, my focus was more on Jeremy than my husband. How was he going to prepare for his PSLE examinations? Leslie would make us all huddle in the master bedroom, and he himself would stare at the video recordings, desperately trying to convince us that he was not imagining those things. If I had not been blindsided by my own self-righteousness and stubbornness, I would have sought help much earlier instead of prioritizing my son over my husband. I would not have brushed off the incident as a mere passing phase, which Leslie would eventually overcome. Unknown to me, these incidents were triggers to the formation of a new plot that was brewing in his mind. The more I rejected his explanation, and the more I got annoyed with him, the more determined he wanted to prove me wrong, thereby causing the plot to thicken. This was the biggest mistake that I made as a wife, being oblivious to his cries for help. When the dog urine incident in Bukit Batok happened in August 2008, I was of no help to him because I was ignorant. I had foolishly allowed my annoyance and anger to cloud my judgment. In retrospect, I could see that it was a long string of incidents that I had overlooked that pointed to Leslie's obvious paranoia. I did not respond with a great sense of urgency to seek external intervention. They say ignorance is bliss. That was not the case in this instance, unfortunately. To his credit, Leslie popped the suggestion of getting a private investigator because he felt that his activities were being monitored and he felt threatened by their knowing his name and his phone number too. The faceless and nameless they was so real to him. He could relate every detail of what he was sensing. I could see the fearfulness in him through his facial expression as his hands and legs trembled as he recounted his experience. He was all out to nab them for causing him undue stress. I relented to his request to hire a private investigator because it could help me determine the three possibilities for Leslie's obsession: genuine spying, spiritual possession, or medical illness. Only one turned out to be the eventual truth. Our agreement was that he would consult a psychiatrist if we failed to find any proof to substantiate his claims. The search for a credible private investigator brought us across the borders to Malaysia because he was convinced that the Singapore investigators were only good at catching cheating spouses. You see how intelligent my husband is? That is very true. Huh? The private investigators in Singapore are good at catching cheating spouses at that time. They're known for that. I was tickled and chuckled to myself. We finally hired the PI after going through a process of evaluating a few agencies based on their records and their tactics used. The hired PI tailed him for 4 days, monitored our place from 7:30 a.m. till 11 p.m. During this period, he shut all the windows tight, driving us all up the wall when we were at home. Finally, the ugly and hard truth was laid out before me. There was no trace of evidence to support Leslie's claim. Leslie was upset and accused the PI of incompetence, citing that their equipment was amateurish and that his stalkers had far more sophisticated technology to conceal themselves. He said the stalkers were using some sort of parabola satellite dish to listen in to his conversations, and they were using a rented room in my next door neighbor's apartment as a hideout to carry out their insidious assignment. He wanted to hire a more capable agency for the job. Now, the PI took me aside and suggested that I take Leslie to see a doctor. The painful reality sank in. I reminded Leslie of our earlier agreement for him to see a psychiatrist, but he refused. Luckily for me, he totally ruled out the possibility of demon possession because it would have been a frightening experience to consult mediums or BOMOs to go through rituals that we were unfamiliar with. What could I do now? Leslie would not budge. He reminded me again that no one in his family should ever see a psychiatrist. Till today, I have no clue how the strong belief came about and why he strongly objected to seeing a psychiatrist. Just so to set the context, my husband, till today, after 14 years, is in denial that he is mentally ill. What Leslie shared and exhibited was insightful for me to understand the pain and suffering he was going through at the onset of his illness. I was his most trusted mate, and that was why he got me involved in his conspiracy theory. He was hoping that I could rescue him from his plight. He was scared and desperate for help, but I offered him no relief. What I saw in him turned me off. I could not comprehend what was happening to him, nor see beyond the symptoms of the sickness and his mindless behavior. I should not have let Leslie deeper into his narrative. The more disbelief I displayed, the more I increased his resolution to prove his sanity. His narrative too became my focal point, averting my attention from pursuing the right solution to his medical problem and to seek medical help early. Now, what led me to writing this paragraph? At that time, during the onset of my husband's illness, I was still working full-time. My job takes me away 50% of the time traveling. I worked on an average 13 hours a day. I slept on an average 4 to 5 hours a day. Now, if you look at my priority, obviously I have a lot of passion for my job, and I'm still very ambitious to pursue my career. And therefore, the busyness becomes sort of an excuse for me. And you have 24 hours in a day. So if work takes up a big part of my time, when I come home after work, who will be next in priority? It will be my boss, and then my husband, and then last, myself, which I don't even have much time for myself. But, you know, all of us wear many hats and roles. And therefore, caregiving is just a part of our role. But I feel if I were to turn back the clock, I would go back and address that. There needs to be more balance, and that would allow me to pay some more attention to my husband, whom I felt was somewhat neglected. So there were regrets on my part if I were to look back. And therefore, I wrote this in the book so that all of you would pay attention to that. Especially now during pandemic, there is a blur line between work life and personal life when you work from home. And so it is very easy to overlook things. And that's why I had this problem, why it was never obvious when the symptoms were showing up in my face, right? So after 6.5 years, I finally learned that early detection can save you and your family a lot of pain and embarrassment. I advocate that you use the breach technique to help you detect the never that obvious to early confirmation of the onset of illness. So what does breach stand for? B, be observant. And what do you observe? Basically, it's important to take note of a point of departure from a person's nature. You have to be disciplined to observe and basically list down the current behaviors and compare this to his previous behaviors over a period of time. So it's not a one-off incident. You need to monitor over a period for that departure of nature, right? R is refrain from overreaction. Try not to react emotionally to the mindless behavior. Thus, losing control and composure as a result. You need to be calm. Involve people whom you trust. I stands for involve. Get people whom you trust and who you love, who know your loved one, to observe as well, to remove bias. Only then can you safely draw a conclusion if this is a normal or abnormal behavior. D, display understanding, not disbelief. Earlier you heard, I actually display disbelief. That's why my husband was all out to prove me wrong and that he is safe. Here, after learning from that mistake, I would say go along with his observation, do not challenge them. Otherwise, this will only aggravate the situation, as he will be driven to do more to convince you. G, got to separate the illness from the person. I made the mistake of associating all of Leslie's undesirable behaviors with his illness. There is a need to be objective and determine how much of the behavior deviation is part of his personality and not attributable to the illness. Last, the E, early medical intervention is key. Now, if all the above steps are taken and you are certain that the behavior is not normal, seek professional help. I have made many mistakes and I still make mistakes today. Everyone makes mistakes because caregiving to a mentally ill loved one is complex. Do not let that be a reason to give up on our loved ones. What matters is the response to the error that comes. Okay. Now I'm going to do another part from my book, from the chapter called Love from Scratch. Was there a time in your marriage when you had been emotionally exhausted by your spouse? How would one cope with a spouse who drained you mentally and emotionally? Leslie was the emotional vampire that constantly drained my emotion during his worst days. My energy was sapped away because I did not know how to set the correct expectation for him and my family. How was I ever going to keep the spark alive in our marriage? Could I possibly make the ride worthwhile and continue to be devoted to him every day? Was there ever going to be a fairy tale ending? When would he fully recover and be my knight in shining armor to protect the family again? These questions kept haunting me whenever I hit a low point. Fortunately, hope whispered, try one more time. Now, a little bit more context as to why I wrote this. During the onset of his illness, I threatened divorce twice. The first time, I felt that he was in the way of my career. Because at that time, I was still working, and I was still pursuing my career and was ambitious. The second time I did it was to get him to comply to taking medicine. on hindsight, they were wrong moves. I was ridden with guilt when I saw that his condition worsened because he felt insecure. It is a guilt that I continue to carry till today. So I feel that love is very important in caregiving. You can't just do your duty without keeping that love alive. And for me, I'm fortunate because being a Christian, it is not for God's love. It is very difficult to go and to see him beyond the ugliness of the symptoms of his illness. God's love is very empowering, and it sustains me in my caregiving role. It also makes me more creative in looking for ways to help my husband seek treatment when he is in denial and refuse to go for treatment. So what happened is I will share this experience, which, it requires creativity on our part. And I think because of love, I did not give up. I figured out how to do it in a creative manner. I was lucky to have found Dr. Ang Yong Guan. And I think most of you are quite familiar with Dr. Ang Yong Guan. And I worked with him to seek his help to diagnose my husband outside of his office. And Dr. Ang's office clinic is in Paragon Medical Center. So I set up an appointment at Dome Cafe at about 6:30 p.m. after the last appointment for Dr. Ang ended. And he was kind enough, and we decided that we will role play as though we were, long lost friends that have not seen each other, but had this opportunity to get together. And so I invited my husband along. And I must say we were both very good actors. All right. And because of Dr. Ang's personality, he does make Leslie warm up to him. He talks like as though he's an old friend. And that made Leslie, my husband, very comfortable. And he started sharing, and he poured out his delusion, his hallucination. That allowed Dr. Ang to diagnose him there and then over 40 minutes of coffee, all right? And after that, he invited my husband, let's go up to my clinic. Let me show you he said, let me show you my office. And because my husband feels comfortable with Dr. Ang, we went up to his office. But guess what? The minute he saw Ang Yong Guan psychiatry, he became withdrawn. And even though Dr. Ang invited him to sit on the sofa, he did not want to do that. He just chose to sit on the chair. And after that, his lips was just zipped up. Whatever Dr. Ang asked him, he was like, just nod and refused to say anything. So, but I think that was, at least Dr. Ang had an opportunity to diagnose him. And I feel that that is important because with that diagnosis, he can then prescribe the antipsychotic drug for him, right? So I think it is important to love the one that we care for. Without love, I think it is very difficult to sustain our caregiving role, right? Okay, I'm going to continue reading, and this will be the last one, I promise you, and then we will hand over to Nadia. All right, and I look forward to an interactive session with you then. Time and again, I reminded myself to practice she, SHE, that has helped to revive our marriage and improve our family relationship. The she approach demanded a very conscious and determined effort to continuously practice it every day until it becomes a habit. I was spurred on to persevere by Leslie's affirmative responses day after day, and I'm now mentally prepared for a tough season ahead. So what is this she approach? S stands for shake off discomfort, tension, and fear of any uncertainty of not knowing what to expect from your loved one. H is humor. So you inject humor at every opportunity in conversation and at play. Last one, E, stands for express your love, warmth, and respect for your loved one openly through words, body language, and physical touch. I like to add that sometimes we turn cold to separate the one who is tearing us down, thinking that it is a defense mechanism. But more often than not, we end up hurting when we make our ill loved one feel unwanted. And that's this beautiful quote for married couples. A successful marriage requires falling in love many times, always with the same person. This quote is by Mignon McLaughlin, right? Okay, now I'm going to hand over the session to Nadia.
Thank you so much, Margaret. That was wonderful. I'm sure everybody else enjoyed it just as much as I did. I've been feverishly taking down notes as well, and we'll probably get you to kind of adjust it. But as promised, I'd like to kind of jump into some of the questions that we have, and we'll try to get through as many as we can. Yeah. The first one we've got, it says, I read articles that humor is a good coping tool. We just spoke about this in your SHE approach. My loved one and I used to laugh over the silliest things. However, I find it hard to bring laughter into my caregiving whenever my loved one suffers a relapse. He didn't like noises and would prefer to keep everything quiet or to the minimum noise level. How, in your opinion, do you think I can bring laughter back into our lives, for lack of a better word, without offending him?
Okay. First, as caregivers, we have to accept that relapses is part of the recovery process. And if you are getting better, relapses will be far and few over time. The new norm of our loved one requires us to change our attitude and adapt to how and when we respond to them. So he didn't like noises. It could be he might be having hallucination because he's hearing voices, and therefore, if we add more to that voice, the noise, it's going to be overwhelming for him or her. So our loved ones do have moments where they are present and lucid. And it is during that moment we introduce laughter and humor. So we need to adjust when and how we do it. And the moment is when they are lucid and they are present. Okay.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Nancy was just asking about the quote. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you just mentioned a successful marriage is about falling in love many times with the same person. Was that correct?
Correct. Yes, that's correct. Falling in love many times, always with the same person.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Does anybody else have any questions for Margaret? Okay, here we go. Some people generally exhibit complex, challenging behaviors prior to their diagnosis. How then can we find the strength to separate the illness from the individual? It's challenging and seems like almost an impossible task. How was this experience for you, Margaret?
Well, separating the illness from the person is about acknowledging that there is a person behind the illness. You love the person, but you hate the sickness. Looking at caregiving from the lens of love is more empowering and sustainable. Otherwise, you will only see the obvious, the ugly symptoms that are in your face.
Actually, if you don't mind, I'm just going to jump in here. We were talking earlier about the bridge. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes, the bridge, yes.
So I'll just run through it quickly. We start with B, be observant. R, refrain from overreaction. Involve people you trust. Display understanding, not disbelief. And we've got to separate the illness from the person that we love. And early detection to be able to identify the mental condition. Now, that's an extremely useful and important piece of sharing. How would you say, for you, it was over a span of 14 years, am I correct? Yes. How would you say in your journey, which stages were more easier for you to come to terms with as opposed to the more challenging ones?
Well, I think for me is that there's always this propensity to be overwhelmed, right? Because during the onset of the illness, truly the person, your loved one, will always most frequently in psychosis state, right? And with that ugliness confronting you day in and day out, we are all human. When I started during that phase, I have no knowledge of mental illness, nor have I been exposed to it. All right. And obviously, first thing is, as a human, your emotion focus on self is, this is not the man I married. What's happening to him? And so you become self-absorbed with your own emotions, all right? And it is normal. It's a normal process for everybody. Well, it took me over a period where it took me 5 to 6 years to come to this point and say, I need this as a toolkit, and keep that in mind and practice it all the time. And practicing it, making a habit out of it, is not easy, right? Because if you don't make a practice and turn it into a habit, you are never going to achieve this, because there is always surprises, unpleasant surprises that spring upon you in caregiving to people who are mentally ill. And so therefore, you require a lot of discipline, and you really need to be more focused. And this will guide you to be conscious about it.
Yeah. In your case, Margaret, it must have been really, really challenging, because you talked about how you had to obviously care for your son as well, and you need to be mindful of your son's needs. One of the questions that we've got is, how do I hold my family together and get them to understand why we need to support our loved one? Some of them tend to think that he's always acting up because he wants attention. I think those of us in this room who are caregivers have also experienced this with other family members or people who mean well, but are trying to ask us why we're not just, how did you go through that? And especially your relationship with your son, with trying to go through this journey as a family for your husband's recovery.
Well, it's certainly difficult because my boys then were age 12 and 8 during the onset. And so at the age of 12 to 13, boys go through hormonal changes. And so he's struggling to find his own identity. And boys at those age, he definitely felt ashamed of his father at that point of time, because you see the weird behavior, and he saw the dad acting out. So he was embarrassed.
Yeah.
All right. And he would not want the father to go to school and get his report card for him when I was away. So he would rather wait for me to come back and reschedule an appointment. So to me, truly, I think to rally the family around supporting the loved one who is ill is you need to have boundary management at home.
Yeah.
And you subject everyone to it. This will allow you to determine clearly also whether the person is acting up or not. All right, otherwise you never know. So you subject everybody to it, and your loved one have moments of lucidness, moments of stability if they are not under psychosis. And so they should be subjected to boundary management. And that puts certain order when things are more dysfunctional at home, when you try to cope with someone who is mentally ill, right? So the boundary management is essential, all right? And you have to use a carrot and a stick approach, right? And to basically encourage certain behavior. Otherwise, it will be difficult, all right? My son actually at that age was very rude with his father. He will raise his voice at his father, and I had to be very strict about it. In fact, I told him I would disown him if he doesn't know how to respect his dad. Because I told him that if ever I ended up like his dad, would he have done that to me? Because I would not like that. And I don't think it's right to do that, because the dad did not ask for that sickness. Okay, he's stricken by it, and we still have to respect him as an individual, because there is a person behind the illness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Our loved ones are not their illness.
Yes.
That's actually a great segue into our next question about boundaries and how to manage our loved ones. I have a question here from Lee. If your loved one is in denial, how does one manage to convince him or her to take psychiatric medication?
Okay, you have to be creative. And I wanted to put a stand here because I do practice covert medication. All right. And I'm not representing Cal in my position and what I practice, but covert medication in this case, obviously for me, is done out of love. And my husband is not of sound mind to decide for himself. So I practice covert medication, and I have to be creative because the medicine will change over time. And my husband is pretty intelligent. All right. We started off with Resveratrol, and it's colorless liquid that I put in his drink. And then over time, as he was administered with tablets, and it's time-based release tablet of different dosage, my husband would take notice and say, why does the color change? What's the difference? And to encourage him to take all this medicine, I position those as supplements. And I get supplements for the whole family. And there will be supplements that we all take as a family. But then those that are his medicine, I position as unique for his requirement, because not everybody is lacking, in the same thing. So he accepted that logic. But when the dosage changed, I would have to come out with a story of a white lie to say that it's a different manufacturing budget. Okay, so it's tedious, all right? You have to be creative. But, you know, I think because he trusted me, and in some way, I do suspect that my husband knows that he's ill, but he refused to acknowledge it because of his pride, all right? But he trusted me, so he went along with it. Because there are times he will stood right beside me to see what I do, right? And that's a time that I will have to be creative on the fly itself to figure out how to distract him and do what I need to do with him, all right? And when, you know, there were times that I actually had to, you know, pound the medication into powder and put it in the drink. And then he tells me it's bitter, that I have to then add Manuka honey, Eno, and all those drinks, fuzzy, you know, the salt. And so that it removed the bitterness from it, and he will continue to take it. Now, we don't have choice because no one is administered the same medication throughout the year. The doctor do adjust the different type of medication and the dosage. And therefore, for me to get him to comply is through all this creative means. Yeah. And you have to be a responsible caregiver when he cannot make that decision on his own. And if it's
Margaret.
less,
Sorry, carry on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, carry on.
Yeah, and if this if this is left unattended for a prolonged period, it will accelerate his condition, and that's not helpful to anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Margaret, I genuinely appreciate your honesty and speaking candidly with us. And I also respectfully recognize that different families will ultimately have to decide for themselves their own caregiving journey for their loved ones. But we just need to state that CAL does not endorse Covert medication. But again, it really is a different experience for everyone. So if there's any concerns that any of our participants have and you would like to get in touch with us in private with regards to support, we'll be able to help you along in any way. And, you know, and of course we have our programs, which is why Margaret's doing her book launch with us today. And it's so exciting because a portion of her proceeds will be going towards supporting CAL in our fundraising. As most of you know, our programs are fully funded, and we provide support for families, for caregivers with loved ones with mental illness. Just to go back a little bit to a point you raised earlier, SHE, shake off discomfort, tension, and uncertainty. Is that correct? Yes.
No, shake off, you shake off your tension, your fear of and discomfort of the uncertainty of not knowing what will happen next, right? What to expect from your loved one. Yes.
Yep. And then the next one is humor, which we all love, and express love to our loved ones. And I really, really appreciate this approach because I think one of the things that we cover in our C2C classes is reminding ourselves, caregivers, that the kindness that we extend to our loved ones, we need to be able to have that level of kindness for ourselves as well as caregivers, because obviously it's a difficult journey. And ultimately, this is somebody that we genuinely love. And, you know, a part of us grieves because we kind of lost a version of this person. But at the end of the day, humor is a coping mechanism that is healthy. And when they see us laugh, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, Margaret, when our loved ones see us laugh, they understand that it's safe, you know, there's no hostility here. We all just want you to be happy, and we're all just here for you. Nelly's got a very nice comment in the chat group. Margaret, the love you have for your husband is amazing. To hear that you have gone such a long way to help him. This is unconditional love in action, and I could not agree more.
Thank you, Nelly.
So if there's no more questions, I think what we can do now is talk about, I know a couple of you have already asked, and there is a link in our chat group of where you can purchase the book online. Again, we urge you to share this with your friends, and in time for Christmas, it'll make a great present, and portions of the proceeds will be going to, Margaret has generously agreed to have a portion of the proceeds come towards CAL, so that we'll be able to keep providing fully funded programs for loved ones. So get your copy now. The price is $16.90. You can take your phone out and screen capture the link in front of you. And do you want to mention there's another version of the book, right? No? Okay. So this is the English version. And today is the first of 2 more sessions, which Margaret will take us through her book. So the first of 3 sessions in total. So there'll be 3 more sessions. Yes, Margaret?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And Nadia, I would like to give the recognition to truly to Ho Fang and Wai Han. They are the one that is generously contributing the part of their own income on the book proceeds to CAL. All right. And truly, I would appreciate your support, because we all benefited from what CAL has done for all the caregivers. I'm also one of the early recipients of CAL's caregiver to caregivers training, and I myself personally volunteered as a trainer for a couple of years with CAL. So I would definitely love to continue to support CAL's effort, because I think that they make great impact on caregivers' lives. So if you can support CAL and continue to support this cause of CAL and be an advocate for caregivers and your loved ones, and together we have a stronger voice in the community to represent their interests. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Thank you, Ho Fang. Thank you, Wai Han, for being with us tonight. Tremendously so grateful. I am one of those individuals that attended classes and then eventually am active volunteer with CAL. So you're helping a lot of families. And thank you again for your sharing this evening. It's been such an honor meeting you, and I hope that more people will go out and start shopping for Christmas. Yeah. Does anybody have any more questions before we wrap up for the evening?
When are the next 2 sessions?
When are the next 2 sessions? Okay, hang on one second. We'll just pull out the dates for you. Here we go. So our next session will be on 5th of January, 2022. That's on a Wednesday, 7 p.m. We will be touching on the shift in mindset towards caregiving. Pen discussion, okay.
There are many of you out there who could be caregivers, primary or secondary, or even people who are not in caregiving. Perhaps, if you have lived experience in the areas that I read about in terms of loving, your loved one in the cause of caregiving, giving them unconditional love, and that it's helping, as well as talking about the initial onset years, how you actually learn through that process to ensure that your loved one get the necessary medical attention early enough. Now, if you have that experience, I look forward you in contributing to this discussion, making it interactive as an audience. That would also be great. And for those who are not caregiving, there must be a reason why you attend this session. And if you care to also share, what the session means to you, that would also, help every one of us in the audience.
Margaret, if I may, I do have a couple more questions in our chat group. If you just indulge me, I have a caregiver that would like to know, what is your secret for self-care? Would you be able to share some of your tips?
Yes. Okay. In general, I'm quite a bubbly person myself.
We can tell.
But in the initial year of caregiving, it's difficult. But how I was able to hold up in my work life compared to my family life is that I know how to switch off and compartmentalize my thoughts, my feelings when I'm at work and when I'm at home. So that allowed me to function, effectively as a working professional. And in fact, many of my colleagues don't know my home situation then. I was able to hold that well because I'm able to compartmentalize my emotions and be very focused. Now, the other thing is that I try to laugh a lot, all right? I laugh a lot by watching comedies, 30 minutes comedies before I go to bed. Because to me, that is a stress relief, all right? My children were still young then. And it is very difficult to pour out your story, your emotions with them because you do not want to burden them. They're still young. I can't discuss that with my husband. My siblings are back in Malaysia. And even you have close friends at that time, it is an awkward conversation. Not everybody understands mental illness. And not everybody will feel comfortable when you try to broach on a subject to share with them. And so, a lot of it in the early years, I have to, keep everything in silence, and with that, I need an outlet.
Yeah.
And that outlet means that, I laugh. And also when I look at my husband's, it used to irritate me when he talks to himself, all right? He'll have hand gestures and all that. But my husband is very smart. He will wear his Bluetooth earpiece. He will go to the window. And as he was talking, and I asked him, who are you talking to? He said, I'm having teleconference. So I said, okay, but if I see that, he's spending too much time talking to himself, I learned to be creative. Instead of snapping at him and say, what are you doing talking to yourself? Which was how I started. It got myself all riled up and it got him upset as well. But when I became creative, I basically said, hey, you're working way too hard. Do you like a coffee break? I make you a coffee and give you some snacks. And he will say, sure, why not? And that's how I draw him away from talking to himself. And when I shared it with Dr. Ong said that my husband is somewhat aware that talking to himself is not a normal behavior. Right. That's why he put on earpiece and he goes to the window, right? And I asked him, is your Bluetooth even activated, connected to your phone? It's not, but it's for sure because it makes him look normal. So in a way, he has that awareness that this is not normal. But the way that I handle it shows him some respect. I don't make him look abnormal, which it is, but I, did not say it in a way that I disrespected him at that time. All right. So one need to be creative.
Yeah. It's a dignity of treating the loved one with the due respect.
Correct. Because with this,
yeah,
you laugh about it. When I look back, this becomes positive memory for me. Yeah. It's not negative memory. So if you build a reservoir of positive memories in your hippocampus, your memory storage bank, it will affect your happiness level as well. All right.
So, Margaret, how, you were talking about how your sons were going through adolescence during their father's onset of illness. I believe they're much older now. How is their relationship with yourself, with your husband, since they've grown up?
Well, obviously they're more understanding of their dad's condition. Mm-hmm. My elder boy has actually matured faster for his age. And so he actually, he focused on the positive points of his dad. Over the years, his dad became more calm, right? When he's lucid, he's more calm. And he's not snappy or restless, and he's not curt in his conversation with his boys or talks down to them. He became more like a father. So my elder boy actually said that he hates to put it like it's a blessing in disguise, but he actually learned to appreciate his dad, right? My second one was young at the onset of my husband's illness. So he had a lot of trauma because I was always away at work. And over the years, he had to learn to overcome fear. Fear of insecurity, excuse me. And so his relationship with his dad is not as warm as my elder one. All right, my second one now is 21. My elder is 25. He's still in a state of confusion. Sometimes when he saw that the way his dad responded to him with warmth, he said that he felt confused, trying to adapt to the old ways that the dad spoke to him. And so in the younger days, they are very fearful of their dad because my husband is very strict, and he uses army style to discipline his kids. So the kids fear him in their growing up years. But when he became ill, right, and as they were growing up, they lost that fear for him. The question is how to build the respect for him is what is most important, and how to maintain a warm relationship with him now that his degree of presence is only 30%. In those good years, he is 70% present. So it was honeymoon years for us to be able to enjoy him and his company. But now it's difficult because 70% of the time he is in his deluded world. All right. And he engages there and he's more comfortable. So for us, we have to make a lot more effort now and have to be really understanding to hear him out, knowing that most of the content of the conversation are of his delusion, right? But we do not tick him off by discounting that or displaying disbelief. We will just find a creative way to move on to another topic of conversation with him. That's how we manage nowadays. Yeah.
I have a question from Mastura here. You mentioned trust a few times. We agree that relationship based on trust is stronger. How else would you use trust in your caregiving?
When he's lucid, I engage him in decision making that not only concern him, concern the boy's education, any family matters. I do not treat him as though as he is not capable of making decisions. Because when he's lucid and present, he's pretty logical and he is a decisive person. He is still able to, share his logic and share his decision and his position on certain matters. So I do still consult him out of respect and not discount it entirely. Now, if he is not giving me logical responses, I will just ignore what is illogical, but that does not stop me from engaging him because he is still family.
Also a sense of empowerment. When he feels that his views matter, he feels very much a part of the family, very much a part of decision making. That's beautiful, Margaret. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's very powerful. And if you had a takeaway, a key takeaway from your experience in the last 14 years, in summary, what would you say the journey has been like for you as a caregiver?
Well, for me is that, as I look back on the journey, obviously I have created good memories along the way to remember him by, because as his illness advances, it's going back to the days like the onset. And therefore, without having a reservoir of good memories to buffer me now, is hard. But I was glad that looking back, the decisions that I have taken and things that I've learned from it to correct myself along the way, to improve things for him, at the same time for the family. I would say that, even though we have my husband who is ill at home, my boys sort of recognize what I have done for them to hold the family together.
Yeah.
And it's also important, even though I'm a mom, I'm not always right at all times. I'm humble enough to recognize that I made mistakes, and I'm not afraid to show that I'm vulnerable, right? I'm being honest. I'm only human. There's only so much I can do. And therefore, I always tell my boy, we need to rally as a family to hold together to support your dad. And I'm honest enough to tell them I can't do it on my own alone. So to me, that journey, when I look back, I feel good that I've done what I could, to keep my husband still in memory, still loving him and not discounting him, to write him off as a family member, but he's very much part of the family. And also at the stage, my kids are able to move forward with their own life, including myself. And I think that's important because I do not want to lose my own identity in the course of caregiving. I do not think I will find that fulfilling and satisfying, and probably be grieving all the time if I were to do that.
You talked about how you wanted to give your husband a sense of being able to contribute to decision making in the household. But the way you speak about your son and your humility is so admirable. And I have so much respect for you, because I think that sometimes when you're a caregiver, and I'm sure a lot of us can relate, you're so worried trying to make decisions for your loved ones. And then you start to think that, no, I need to know better than everybody else, because you're trying to keep the ship running. But in your case, you talk about how you've been open and vulnerable with your children. And you not only, how you handle your husband when he's lucid, you kind of let him weigh in on family decisions. But it sounds like you also let your children be involved as part of providing support for your husband's care. And I think that is so, so important.
Yeah, throughout the caregiving years, there were 3 occasions that I brought my children to see the psychiatrist as well, to understand their dad's condition. In the early onset year, I brought them in for the psychiatrist to explain the father's illness in layman's terms to them, and for them to ask any questions that they need to clarify with the doctor. Subsequently, at different treatment phase, I brought them in to see Dr. Ong to explain what ECT treatment is all about. In fact, Dr. Ong showed them video of what it looks like, telling them the pros and cons, what are the side effects, and they were asking questions. So when we talk about temporary memory loss, my son will worry, will my dad even remember my face when he gets up? So it gives them an opportunity to learn about the dad's illness, to also be involved in the process. But because they were young, when I got them involved, I was very clear to tell them that, I'm not expecting you to make the decision because you're still young. But I'm involving you. Ultimately, the responsibility lies with me in making the final decision, whether to put the dad through ECT or not. So that actually gave them a relief, because they were quite afraid to be involved in the decision, but they were open to receive information, of, what the treatment is all about, and what stage of the illness was the dad in, and what's the implication on them. Yeah.
That is so powerful in itself. How old were they roughly when they first went to the doctor's office with you to get an understanding of their father's condition?
The elder one was 13 and the second one 9 years old.
Amazing.
Yeah, and that was the first meeting my elder one actually asked the psychiatrist that if my dad gets it, will I get it too? And so the psychiatrist actually came out and pulled me aside and said, how old is your son? Then I told him the age. He said, I'm surprised. I'm surprised he asked me that question. He is very matured, he said, Yeah. So I think those decisions were good decisions, what we have done, at that time, as a family, to be involved in caregiving, even though they are not the primary caregivers, but they are kept abreast of what's happening to their dad. I kept them abreast of every doctor's prognosis after each and every consultation session. I kept them updated. Till today, I kept them abreast of what the doctors say. My elder one is old enough that he is involved in the decision of my husband's treatment plan when we have discussion with the doctors. Yeah.
And I'm sure at some point you and the boys will be looking at long-term plans as well. Have you gotten to the point where you and your sons are talking about what happens in the future when you and your husband are much older?
Okay. that's where my book 2 will talks about,
Ooh,
you know,
okay.
beyond
Let's no spoilers, okay? No spoilers.
no, this book talks about the first 7 years of caregiving experience, and my book 2 will kind of detail some of the stuff on how we will move forward, and the things that happened from after 7 years till current. Yeah.
This is so powerful what you've done, putting this into a book, and you're helping so many other people, and that's exactly what Cal is all about creating a community and providing support for our community. I have a question here from Eliza. How does a person suddenly get this illness from a very intelligent person to a perfectly normal to suddenly sick? Are there triggers and genetic? Do you want to take this question, Margaret?
Okay. I once spoke to a scientist from Duke Medical School, and she does genetic studies, gene mapping. And she told me there is no gene for schizophrenia, specific to schizophrenia. My husband, by the way, suffers from schizophrenia. So again, we talk about genetic, but she said in her gene mapping studies, there is no gene that is tied to schizophrenia so specifically. And so that's one data point, all right? Then Dr. Ong did share with my boys that every one of us has this 1% propensity to be mentally ill. And this 1% could grow if you don't have the right perspective of life and you're able to cope with very toxic or extreme stress. And that could cause you to be mentally ill as well. Because, you know, you will have a perfectly normal brain, but some chemistry will change. And as a result, people would suffer from mental illness, right? So these are the two data points that I have. And also, I think, you know, some people have certain belief systems. And that belief, if they are proven wrong because the belief is so deep set, it could also trigger, right? Trigger the person to be mentally ill because suddenly the belief system is broken. So all this could be contributing factor to mental illness. And therefore, I think mental wellness, it's important. When we talk about self-care, it's not just physical. The mental care part is also something that we ought to pay attention to. So there will be mental, physical, physiology. We really have to take care of ourselves holistically.
Thank you so much, Margaret. I think we've gone through quite a fair bit of questions. Before we wrap up for the evening, shall we share on the screen again how our participants will be able to get their hands on Margaret's book? Again, it is available online. We're about to share the screen with you, a link, which is also available in our chat. A portion of the proceeds from this book sale will help Cal to further fund programs for families and provide support with loved ones with mental illness. Again, guys, it's Christmas. Come on, this is a great gift. I couldn't plug it more if I tried. Of course I couldn't, but share it with your friends, share it with your family. Take the link, take a photo of the screen, and if there's no more questions, or if you want to ask us questions in private, please feel free to get in touch with a team member from Cal or write into us via email. We're more than happy to help you facilitate a question for Margaret if you would like. And we look forward to seeing you at our next session in January. In the meantime, thank you so much, Margaret, for tonight. It has been such an honor. And to everyone for making the time, thank you again. To all of our caregivers, we are here for you, and thank you for being a part of the Cal community. And we wish you a Merry Christmas and a wonderful New Year. See you in January, Margaret.
See you all. Thank you. And Merry Christmas to all.
Merry Christmas. Goodbye, everyone.